Well, hello, Malika.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to take this interview with
Yeah,
us.
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, so do you mind taking a brief moment to introduce yourself and what are you interested in your research?
Yeah, my name is Mallika Nocco, and I am a new assistant professor and statewide extension specialist in agricultural water management. My lab is called the Conservation Irrigation Lab, and we work on trying to save water, renew soils, and support farms. That's our motto. And we do that by, focusing on irrigation management, thinking about it from, a precision standpoint, trying to find opportunities to optimize irrigation and fertigation too. And we're also interested in improving the physical aspects of soil health that are related to soil hydrologic function.
Absolutely. Thank you. That all sounds very exciting and we're very happy to have you here in Madison. Um, can you talk a little bit about why what you're interested in terms of research is important to Wisconsin or even the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a rapidly aridifying and warming climate. And under, those circumstances, we, especially farmers, are being tasked with growing more food with less water. So, and that's global, but it's also of importance here in Wisconsin because even though we think of ourselves as a relatively wet place, things are just becoming more uncertain. So we have water, but it's showing up more intensely. It's showing, with our rain events getting more intense, we're seeing more droughts. We're just seeing a lot more uncertainty. And because of that, it's as important as it has ever been to do well with our water management, both in our irrigated systems, like in the Central Sands part of the state, in managing nutrients in conjunction with our irrigation, and then even in our rain-fed systems where really we're relying on precipitation in these patterns to water our crops. So how can we build the best house, and by house I mean soil, to provide that water for our crops and also keep our topsoil in place?
Absolutely. Those sounds like great goals to have, but also very challenging goals to achieve. In terms of what you have in your research program, as far as recommendations or thoughts or food for thought in general for our farmer audience, anything that you would like to tell a farmer in our videos?
So I'm super excited to be a part of the Rural Partnerships Project here at the University of Wisconsin. And the focus of where I'm working on is just this idea of trying to improve strategies for co-managing irrigation and fertilizer, right? Because, our growers here are tasked with trying to do the best that they can with nitrogen management, but then our growing environment is pretty challenging in a way that maybe people don't always understand, in that it's actually harder to manage irrigation and harder to manage fertility when you have unpredictable rain events happening during your growing season. So, I came from California and had my research lab there, and it actually was easier to factor in nitrogen recommendations from irrigation water for those farmers because they had a better estimate of how much groundwater they were going to use for irrigation and how much nitrogen was going to be in that groundwater. Here in Wisconsin, it's much more unpredictable because we don't know how much precipitation we're going to get, and that's going to be, used by the crops, as opposed to how much groundwater is going to be needed to be used by the crops in order to understand what the nitrogen contribution is from that groundwater. So there is some fertilizer, right? That's what the nitrogen is in the groundwater. And in order for our farmers to take advantage of that, we have to have better ways to measure that in real time. And that's what we're working on. We're working on new sensors that can actually measure the nitrogen content of groundwater in real time and be actionable for growers in the state to try to adjust their nutrient management based on the amount of irrigation that they're applying that's groundwater sourced.
That sounds great. So in your vision, if I'm a farmer with multiple pivots on my farm that I need to manage, um, how would I incorporate this technology on my farm to manage my nitrogen smarter?
Yeah, so this is definitely something that'll be a little ways down the line, right? So we're working on figuring out how exactly to do it. But what I'm kind of envisioning is that we have some sense based on, historical averages and our best statistical tools for a given moment in the season based on how much precipitation we've received and that as to how much groundwater will be applied in a given year, right, for the rest of the season, depending on your crop. And that is how we would want you to, or want growers to be factoring that additional groundwater contribution into their nitrogen management plan. And I acknowledge that this is going to be tricky to do, right? This isn't super straightforward because it's really hard to manage this in real time, right? And to make these adjustments in real time, but this is the vision.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that this work is extremely important because accounting for every single source within our nitrogen input when you're managing your fields is critical. Like I always like to say every pound has this impact when it comes to leaching. So if we can decrease the amount of nitrogen that we can apply without sacrificing yield, that's a huge win environmentally. And I wonder if this work is collaborated with other researchers on campus or across Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, before I answer that question, I want to follow up on one thing. I also want to bring up that a part of the Rural Partnerships Project is that this is one solution that is being explored for better nitrogen management as part of the Rural Partnerships Project. We're exploring several different solutions, and not every solution or not every group of solutions is going to be right for each grower, right? So depending on the size of an operation, depending on the level of comfort with technology and interest in doing that type of dynamic in-season management, there may be some growers that are like, oh yeah, that sensor sounds cool. It sounds like something I want to implement. And there might be other folks that are, still getting comfortable with just irrigation scheduling. So like there's going to be some differences, and what we're hoping to do is provide a suite of options or like a menu of options that growers can choose from.
Absolutely. I'm a little curious about where the research is at as of this point, as we're in the fall of 2024.
Yeah.
And what's your vision for completing the project in terms of a timeline?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a tricky. Gosh, hold my feet to the fire. No, I love it. We're developing our sensors and we're comparing them to commercial sensors that are available because we don't want to discount any sensors that might already be available to do this type of work. So there's going to be testing in comparison to commercial sensors, and then the sensor that we are developing, which is being led by Matthew Digman, who is an assistant professor actually in the office next to mine. He's kind of the lead on the sensor development component. We did collect several groundwater nitrogen samples over the summer to try to understand how the variability, what the variability is in the nitrate that's in the groundwater, and also like how good do our sensors have to be, right? Like, and that's this variability component. Like, what's the spread, and what do we need as far as sensitivity from these sensors? So that's where we are right now. And then, yeah, we're kind of going to be in the process of looking at those samples, comparing them to the new sensors in development and then existing commercial sensors. I also want to shout out Dr. Logan Ebert, who is a postdoctoral researcher who's actually doing a fair amount of the work in terms of the sampling and the analysis.
Yes. We all love Logan.
We all love Logan.
Thank you all for watching this episode, and we'll be back with Dr. Mallika Nocco in the next upcoming months.